A young mechanic from a small harbor town just solved the Navy's impossible glitch, the critical failure that grounded the fleet's most advanced drone for weeks and baffled top engineers. Working with nothing but her worn toolbox, sharp instincts, and a willingness to crawl into places no one else could reach, she brought the billion-dollar machine back to life. But what happened next? This powerful, true story of how a civilian with tiny hands fixed the Navy's impossible glitch will inspire anyone who has ever been underestimated. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. The clang of steel echoed through the cavernous hangar at Dry Dock 17, where the Navy's newest unmanned surveillance drone, Horizon FAP, sat like a silent predator under the harsh glow of overhead lamps. For 3 weeks, the billion-dollar craft had been grounded, its flight control system crippled by a glitch no one could trace. At the far end of the hangar, tucked into the shadow of a rusted storage rack, Sophia Bennett wiped her hands on a shop rag. Her workspace, barely the size of a walk-in closet, was a world away from the polished chaos of the Navy's engineering teams. At 26, barely 5'3". She looked more like a college student than the kind of person who could salvage a national security asset. She was oil-streaked, hair pulled into a messy knot, and surrounded by parts scavenged from machines the Navy had long since written off. It was here, amid the hum of generators and the smell of hydraulic fluid, that the call came. "Bennett." The voice on the line was crisp, commanding. "Admiral Avery, we need you at Dock 17 immediately." Sophia's brow furrowed. "You've got an entire fleet of engineers." "Admiral." There was a pause. Then, "They've all failed, and if you can't fix this, the Horizon will never fly." Sophia didn't like the way the hangar went silent when she walked in. Rows of engineers in crisp navy blues and spotless coveralls paused mid-task, their eyes following her like she was a tourist who'd wandered into a restricted zone. The Horizon Force loomed at the center, sleek, angular, and intimidating, its matte black fuselage absorbing the light. Admiral Avery strode toward her, flanked by Commander Marcus Hale, the project's operations lead. Hale's jaw was set in the kind of tight line that said, "This is a waste of time." "Bennett," Avery said without preamble, "this drone is the backbone of a mission that can't be delayed. It failed pre-launch checks 3 weeks ago. No one's been able to trace the issue. The control interface refuses all commands flight, diagnostics, even basic system pings. Every software patch we've tried gets rejected. We've burned through 3 engineering rotations. Nothing." Sophia glanced at the engineers gathered nearby. Most avoided her gaze. A few didn't bother hiding their skepticism. "So why me?" she asked. Hale crossed his arms. "We need someone who can crawl into the guts of this thing. There are components in here no one's touched since assembly. Half the wiring is buried behind micro-actuators smaller than your pinky. Our people can't even reach them without disassembling the entire fuselage." Sophia let her eyes roam the length of the craft. She noticed something no one mentioned: the faint, uneven wear on one of the undercarriage access panels. It was subtle, the kind of imperfection that would vanish under a casual glance. But to her it looked like a place where someone had fought with a stuck latch more than once. "You've been chasing this like it's a software problem," she said slowly. "Has anyone considered a mechanical trigger for the lockout?" Rourke, the lead systems engineer, snorted. "We've got full sensor coverage. If it was mechanical, we'd see it." "Not if the trigger isn't broken, just out of place," Sophia countered. "A sensor can't flag what it's programmed to think is normal." Hale frowned. "You think a piece of hardware is convincing the AI that it's unsafe to power up?" "It's possible," she said. "And if that's true, you're never going to fix it from a terminal." A murmur rippled through the group. Avery cut through it. "What do you need? Sophia pointed toward the maintenance pit under the horizon. Access to the belly compartment, no interruptions, and someone who knows the assembly sequence of the stabilizer housings. Within minutes, she was on her back under the drone, a headlamp cutting a narrow cone of light into the dark. The belly compartment was tight enough that she had to twist sideways and slide in at an angle. Even her small frame barely fit. She ran her fingertips along the inner surface until they brushed a narrow channel of wires, no wider than a shoelace. The insulation felt warm, too warm for a craft that hadn't powered up in weeks. "Commander," she called, "what's on this circuit?" Rourke's voice crackled over the comm. Secondary servo alignment sensors. They tell the AI if the stabilizers are locked. "Yeah. Well," Sophia said, "one of them is lying to you." Her lamp caught at a hairline crack in the mounting bracket of the sensor, no bigger than a fingernail. It was just enough for vibration during assembly to nudge the sensor out of perfect alignment. To the AI, that meant unstable stabilizer, which triggered a total lockout. Sophia smiled grimly. "Gotcha." She pulled a tiny adjustable wrench from her pocket, nudged the bracket back into position, then tightened it until the hairline closed. "Tell your system to run a cold start check." Up on the control deck, Hale relayed the order. Engineers bent over their consoles, their expressions shifting from boredom to disbelief as the first green indicators flickered to life. "Flight control is responding. Someone called out? Navigation system online?" And then, like the sound of an engine turning over after a long winter, the deep, resonant hum of the Horizon's power core filled the hangar. Hale's eyes widened. "That's impossible." Sophia slid out from under the drone, grease smudging her cheek, hair sticking to her forehead. She shrugged. Not impossible, just hidden in a place no one bothered to look. The hangar was quiet for a moment, and then Admiral Avery clapped her on the shoulder. "Bennett, you may have just saved this mission." Sophia allowed herself the smallest smile. Guess tiny hands aren't just for coffee cups. The engineers who'd doubted her stood back. The reality settling in the Navy's impossible glitch had been beaten not by brute force code or expensive hardware, but by a mechanic with the patience to feel for what was wrong. And somewhere deep inside, Sophia knew this was only the beginning. The Horizon V's core systems purred like a predator waking from hibernation. Engineers scrambled around the hangar, checking diagnostics, rushing to capitalize on the breakthrough before anything else could go wrong. Sophia leaned against her rolling tool cart, watching the green lights ripple across the control board. She could almost feel the tension loosening in the room until a sharp, high-pitched beep cut through the air. Every screen froze. "What was that?" Hale barked, striding toward the nearest terminal. A junior tech's voice trembled. We've triggered a system escalation protocol. The AI has initiated a full combat readiness sequence." The hangar went dead silent. "Combat readiness," Sophia repeated, stepping forward. Rourke's face had gone pale. "This drone is loaded with classified surveillance arrays and stealth systems that can't be powered inside U.S. airspace. If the AI thinks it's prepping for deployment here, we're in violation of federal treaty protocols. The automatic safeguard is destruction of the onboard data cores." Sophia's stomach turned. Translation self-wipe. Rourke nodded grimly. "And once it starts, there's no stopping it." The countdown appeared on the central monitor, T-minus 15 hours. Hale snapped into motion, ordering his team to run overrides, but every keystroke was met with the same cold response from the AI command denied. Sophia's mind raced. She had barely touched the belly compartment, but if her adjustment to the stabilizer sensor convinced the AI it could fly, it might have also triggered deeper protocols, ones it had been holding back until mission-ready status was achieved. "Where's the manual kill?" she demanded. "There isn't one." Rourke shot back. "This drone was designed without physical overrides. All command paths are digital, encrypted, and locked to the AI's operational hierarchy. Sophia stared at the horizon, her pulse pounding in her ears. No overrides meant the only way to stop the countdown was to speak to the AI in a language it recognized not code, not protocol, but through the hardware it depended on. She grabbed her stethoscope, slid under the fuselage again, and pressed the cold metal disc to the frame near the stabilizer housing. The faint hum from before was gone, replaced by a rapid, irregular vibration, like a heartbeat racing toward panic. "Talk to me. Girl," she murmured. "What's making you think you're in combat?" She traced the vibration path along the undercarriage until she found it a secondary feedback loop from the gyro array feeding directly into the AI's threat assessment module. The readings were spiking, telling the AI the drone was already in hostile territory. "It's scared," Sophia whispered, realization dawning. Hale crouched beside her. "We don't have time for poetry." "Bennett, can you stop it?" Sophia's eyes scanned the maze of conduits and mounts. "If I can trick the AI into thinking the stabilizers are locked in maintenance mode, it should abort combat readiness. But I'll have to sever and reroute a live feedback line without tripping the failsafe." Live Hale's brow furrowed. "That's high voltage." She shot him a dry look. "Yeah, I noticed." From above, Avery's voice cut in over the comms. "You've got 10 minutes. Do it." Sophia slipped on insulated gloves and pulled a length of thin-gauge wire from her kit. She loosened the feedback line coupling, careful not to break the ceramic insulator, and slid her makeshift bypass into place. A single bead of sweat rolled down her temple, catching in the light. 7 minutes, Hale warned. The vibration under her stethoscope slowed, evening out. On the monitors above, the AI's threat indicators began to drop, one by one. 5 minutes. Sophia twisted the final securing nut into place and pressed her palm against the bypass, feeling the current settle. Up in the control booth, the countdown froze at 3:42, then disappeared. Cheers erupted around the hangar. Sophia slid out from beneath the horizon, lying flat on the cool concrete for a moment, breathing hard. Hale offered her a hand, and she took it, letting him pull her to her feet. "Nice work," he said quietly, respect softening his voice. Admiral Avery approached, eyes sharp but mouth curved into the faintest smile. "You just saved us from an international incident. Bennett, and from losing the most advanced drone in our fleet." Sophia glanced at the horizon, its sleek frame gleaming under the hangar lights. She wasn't broken. She was just misunderstood. Around them, the engineers were already rewriting protocols, murmuring about new training modules, and making mental notes that maybe, just maybe, the next time they hit an impossible glitch, they'd look beyond the code. Sophia didn't need the thanks. The hum of the Horizon systems was all she needed to know she'd done her job. But deep down, she knew this day had changed everything. For her, for them, and for the way the Navy would listen to its machines from now on. For the next hour, the hangar buzzed with a different kind of energy. Gone was the brittle edge of frustration and doubt. In its place, a hum of guarded optimism. The Horizon V stood ready on her landing gear, systems stable, her once defiant AI quiet, as if waiting for the next set of instructions. Sophia stood off to the side, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup someone had shoved into her hand. She watched as the engineers ran diagnostics not with the smug confidence she'd seen earlier, but with a new kind of caution. They glanced toward her more often now, not in judgment, but as though checking to see if she approved of what they were doing. Commander Hale approached, hands clasped behind his back. "You made a lot of people here rethink the way they work today," he said, his tone softer than she'd ever heard it. Sophia gave him a half smile. It wasn't magic. "Commander, just patience. and a willingness to get my hands dirty in places no one else wanted to look. That's exactly the problem, Hale replied. We've trained ourselves to trust systems over senses. Somewhere along the line, we stopped touching the machines we work on. She glanced at the horizon. Machines don't lie, Commander. They just don't always speak our language. You've got to meet them halfway. Across the hangar, Rourke, who'd been the most vocal skeptic, walked toward them. He stopped in front of Sophia, his expression unreadable. Bennett, he said. I owe you an apology. I thought you were a PR stunt. She arched an eyebrow. And now, his lips quirked into a faint, self-deprecating smile. Now I think I should probably sign up for whatever course you teach, if you ever teach one. Sophia didn't answer right away. She studied him for a moment, saw the sincerity in his eyes. It's not a course, she said finally. It's just paying attention to the little things. The clicks, the hums, the way a panel feels under your fingertips. Machines talk. You just have to want to listen. Before Rourke could respond, Admiral Avery's voice rang out from the control deck. All hands, prep for full systems trial. We're taking the Horizon to the runway. The hangar doors groaned open, spilling sunlight across the floor. The drone rolled forward on its landing gear, guided by ground crew. Its black surface caught the light like glass. Sophia walked alongside, keeping pace until they reached the edge of the runway. Bennett, Avery called from above. You want the honors? She blinked. You're asking me to... Give her the green light, Avery confirmed. You're the reason she's flying today. Sophia stepped into the control booth, the headset cool against her ears. The pre-flight checklist scrolled across the screen in front of her. She could feel the eyes of the entire hangar on her. But she tuned them out, listening instead to the faint hum of the Horizon systems through the feed. Stabilizers locked, she said into the mic. Navigation synced, AI status green. Avery gave her a nod. Launch on your call. Sophia took a breath. Horizon? This is Bennett. Let's see what you can do. With a smooth surge of power, the drone rolled down the runway, lifted gracefully into the air, and climbed into the blue. The control booth erupted in applause, but Sophia just leaned against the console, smiling quietly to herself. In that moment, she wasn't the girl with tiny hands who'd been underestimated her entire career. She wasn't the outsider brought in as a last resort. She was the reason the Navy's most advanced drone was alive and operational. When the Horizon circled back for landing 20 minutes later, the applause was louder, the congratulations warmer. Hale clapped her on the back. Rourke shook her hand, and Avery simply said, We'll be in touch. As the adrenaline faded, Sophia realized something had shifted not just in the Navy's perception of her, but in her own view of herself. She had walked into this hangar as a mechanic. She was leaving as something more, a problem solver, a listener, and maybe even a leader. And deep down, she knew this wasn't the last time the Navy would call. Because now, they understood sometimes the smallest hands are the ones that reach the deepest. 2 days after the Horizon's successful flight, Sophia was back in her cramped garage at Gray Harbor. The salt air slipped through the cracked window, carrying the familiar scent of brine and rust. She'd just finished replacing a stubborn alternator in a fisherman's pickup when the sound of rotors cut through the quiet. A Navy helicopter was landing on the pier. She wiped her hands on a rag, stepped outside, and shaded her eyes. Commander Hale was the first to disembark, his uniform pressed so sharply it could have been cut from steel. Behind him, Admiral Avery followed, her presence as steady and unyielding as before. Bennett, Hale called over the roar of the rotors, we've got another problem. Sophia crossed her arms. I thought you people didn't like making a habit of this. Avery's mouth twitched, almost a smile. This isn't routine. We've got a carrier group stalled in the North Pacific. Their primary deck lift system failed mid-operation. One aircraft stuck halfway between the hangar deck and flight deck, blocking both. Every hour it stays jammed. The carrier's operational readiness drops, and we're losing daylight for a mission window we can't miss. Sounds like a mechanical jam, Sophia said, wiping a smear of grease from her cheek. It is, Hale replied. But the lift's hydraulic control is integrated with the carrier's automated safety AI. The moment the system detected irregular tension, it locked everything down. Our engineers can't override it without dismantling the whole lift assembly, something that takes days, not hours. Avery's gaze was direct. We need that lift moving in 6. The only way is to bypass the AI and manually reset the hydraulic sequence from inside the control bay. The space is small. Sophia smirked. Too small for your guys. Hale didn't deny it. Too small for anyone except someone who knows how to work blind in tight spaces. She felt the weight of the decision. But the truth was, she'd already made it. When do we leave? By nightfall, Sophia was aboard the USS Arcadia, the deck pitching gently under a slate-gray sky. The aircraft elevator loomed in front of her massive steel platforms suspended on thick cables, frozen in mid-ascent like a trapped animal. Lieutenant Vega, the carrier's deck officer, briefed her quickly. "The control bay is behind that bulkhead," she said, pointing to a narrow hatch, 2 feet wide, no direct lighting. You'll have to snake through the hydraulic lines to reach the manual bypass. Sounds cozy, Sophia muttered, pulling on her coveralls. Hale knelt beside her before she entered. Once you're in, you'll have 30 minutes to reset the system before the hydraulic cycle automatically and lock for good. She nodded. Plenty of time. The hatch was barely wide enough for her shoulders. She slid in on her stomach, headlamp casting a weak glow over a maze of pipes, pistons, and thick steel cables. The heat hit her immediately close, damp and heavy with the smell of hydraulic fluid. Halfway in, she heard it a faint, rhythmic hiss. She paused, listening closely. It wasn't random. It was the release valve cycling just enough to keep pressure from building, like the system was holding its breath. "You're nervous too." "Huh," she murmured to the machinery. She found the bypass lever wedged behind a pipe bend, its locking pin rusted solid. With her left hand barely able to grip in the cramped space, she worked the pin loose millimeter by millimeter, every creak of metal echoing through the bay. 10 minutes! Hale's voice came over her earpiece. "I'm on it," she replied, biting back the frustration in her voice. Finally, the pin came free. She shifted her weight, reached up, and threw the bypass lever. The hiss stopped. In the distance, she heard the elevator's cables strain, then slowly unwind. "Platform's moving," Vega's voice rang in her ear. Sophia began wriggling backward, her knees scraping against cold steel. When she emerged, the deck crew was already guiding the stuck aircraft onto the flight deck. Applause broke out, not loud, but sincere. Avery extended her hand. 2 impossible problems in 1 week. That's a record. Bennett. Sophia took it, her palm still smeared with rust. "Guess you'd better stop underestimating me, Admiral." Avery's smile was faint but real. "I think we already have." As the Arcadia's deck came alive again, Sophia felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just a job anymore, it was a calling. And she had a feeling the Navy's impossible list was far from empty. The hum of the Arcadia's engines was steady now, a comforting backdrop to the after-action debrief in the wardroom. Sophia sat at the far end of the long table, sipping black coffee that tasted faintly of metal. Around her, officers traded updates in clipped, precise language, but every so often, someone's eyes drifted her way. They weren't the curious, doubtful looks she'd gotten when she first walked into Dock 17. These were different, measuring, maybe even respectful. Commander Hale was speaking, wrapping up a report on flight deck readiness, when Admiral Avery's voice cut in. "Before we close, I'd like to recognize Mr. Bennett for solving 2 critical failures in less than a week, failures that could have compromised operational readiness and safety." Sophia felt heat rise to her face. She wasn't used to speeches. She fixed her gaze on the coffee cup in her hands. Avery continued. It's not just what she fixed, it's how she did it. She approached each problem without ego, without assuming the answer was in a manual or a code line. She listened to the machine. A murmur went around the table. Sophia glanced up and caught Rourke, the systems engineer from the Horizon project, leaning against the wall. He gave her a small nod. Later, on the flight deck, she found herself alone under the night sky. The Pacific stretched endlessly in every direction, the carrier's lights casting gold ripples across the water. She leaned against the safety rail, breathing in the salt air, trying to process the week's events. When she'd first stepped into the Navy's world, she'd been the girl with tiny hands, a novelty brought in to reach places no one else could. Now, she realized, she'd become something else, someone they called when the situation went beyond the reach of protocols. Footsteps approached from behind. "Thought I'd find you out here," Hale said, joining her at the rail. "Not hiding," she replied. "Just thinking." He studied her profile in the dim light. "You know, the first time I saw you in the hangar, I thought this was a mistake, that you'd get eaten alive by the system." She smirked. "You weren't entirely wrong. But you didn't let it happen," he said. "You showed everyone here that sometimes we need to break from procedure, not recklessly, but with purpose. That's a rare skill." She shrugged. "Machines don't care about procedure. They care about function, and sometimes function hides in the smallest, messiest places." Hale hesitated, then added, "The Admiral's talking about putting you on a list people we call for technical crises. You'd still be a civilian, but you'd be on the inside." Sophia let the idea settle. She thought about her garage, the familiar smell of oil and metal, the slow rhythm of local repair jobs. Then she thought about the locked hatch on the Arcadia, the belly of the Horizon, the adrenaline of solving something that no one else could. "I don't know if I fit inside your world, Commander," she said finally. "Maybe that's exactly why you do," he replied. The next morning, she visited the Arcadia's maintenance crew in the lower decks. They were young, tired, and more comfortable with diagnostics tablets than socket wrenches. She knelt beside a sailor struggling with a jammed pump seal, guiding his hands as he worked the stubborn ring free. "Don't fight it," she told him. "Feel for the give. You'll know it's ready before it moves." When the seal popped loose, his face lit up. "How did you—" "By listening," she said simply. "Machines always tell you before they quit. You just have to pay attention." By the time the Arcadia reached Pearl Harbor, word had spread through the crew about the mechanic who talks to machines. Some came to her with stubborn parts, others just to ask questions. And Sophia realized she liked this part, the sharing, the teaching almost as much as the fixing. She was still the girl with tiny hands. But now those hands carried the weight of trust from a fleet. And that, she thought, might be the biggest change of all. 3 weeks later, Sophia found herself in a place she never expected, the Navy Command Auditorium in San Diego. The room was wide and bright, its tiered seating filled with officers in dress whites, civilian contractors in dark suits, and a scattering of curious young mechanics from various naval yards. At the center of the stage stood the Horizon V's sleek nose cone, gleaming under spotlights like a trophy. Behind it, a projection screen cycled through images, grainy stills of her under the drone's belly, wedged into the Arcadia's hydraulic control bay, a wrench in her hand. She had been invited to speak. "I'm not a public speaker," she began, gripping the sides of the podium. "I'm a mechanic. I fix things other people give up on, and until recently, I thought that's all I was ever going to do." A low murmur rippled through the audience. "When the Navy first called me, I thought it was a mistake. I didn't have the right resume, the right rank, or even the right size. At least that's what people used to say about me." She held up her hands, small and calloused, drawing a few chuckles. They said these were coffee shop hands, not hands that could save $1 billion drone or free a carrier's flight deck. Her voice steadied. "But here's the thing. Machines don't care who you are. They don't care about your age, your title, or whether you can bench press your own weight. They just need someone to listen when they're trying to tell you something is wrong. That's what I did. That's what anyone here can do, if they're willing to slow down and pay attention." She saw Admiral Avery watching from the front row, a faint smile on her usually immovable face. "The problems I walked into weren't solved by bigger budgets or fancier code or more degrees. They were solved by crawling into the dark corners no one else wanted to go, by feeling for a loose bracket or a misaligned sensor, by trusting instincts that didn't come from a textbook. And I know what some of you are thinking: that's not scalable, it's not efficient. But here's what I believe you can teach people to run diagnostics. But you have to show them how to listen. You have to remind them that machines are built by humans, and sometimes they inherit our flaws, our hesitations, even our fears." She paused, letting the silence stretch. 2 missions, 2 impossible problems, and in both cases, the real fix came from remembering that technology, no matter how advanced, still depends on the human connection, the hands, the eyes, the patience. Without that, we're just waiting for the next failure to catch us by surprise. The room was still, the kind of stillness that comes when people are actually hearing you. So my challenge to everyone here, whether you're designing the next horizon or working on a decades-old carrier, is this: never be too proud to get your hands dirty. And never dismiss the person who sees the problem from a different angle, just because they don't fit the mold. When she stepped back from the podium, the applause was immediate and not polite applause, but a full-bodied roar that filled the hall. Avery met her at the edge of the stage. "You just rewrote the unofficial playbook. Bennett," the Admiral said. "Not sure they'll print that," Sophia replied with a half-smile. "They will," Avery said. "Or I will." As the audience filed out, a young woman in coveralls, barely 20, approached her. "Ma'am, I'm training at the Norfolk Yard. Everyone says the control bays are too tight for me to be useful." Sophia handed her the small wrench she'd carried since she was 17. "Then go show them what they're missing." The girl's smile was worth more than the applause. That night, standing alone on the pier as the sun sank into the Pacific, Sophia realized this was bigger than drones or lifts or even the Navy. It was about possibility. And knowing that sometimes the smallest hands leave the biggest mark, Sophia Bennett's story wasn't just about fixing machines. It was about dismantling assumptions. For years, people had measured her worth by the size of her hands, the length of her resume, and the weight of her credentials. Twice in a single week. She proved that none of those metrics defined capability. Anyone can solve the impossible if they're willing to get their hands dirty and think beyond the manual. As the sun slipped below the Pacific, Sophia Bennett sat on the pier outside Gray Harbor, her old wrench resting beside her. But she wasn't sketching plans for her next repair job. She was mapping out a mentorship program for young mechanics who'd once been told, "You're not cut out for this," the way she had. Because for Sophia, and for those who come after, the real limit was never the machine. It was only what people believed was possible. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click to keep going and hit subscribe if you believe the smallest hands can make the biggest difference.